former Hog halfback? Okay, maybe not. Here is Doc Washburn, News Radio 102.9 KARN.
What a day. On August 23rd, 1987, at about 4 a.m. on a Sunday morning, the three-man crew on a Union Pacific train passing through Saline County, Arkansas, were horrified to see the bodies of two teenage boys on the tracks in front of them with no way to stop. They blew the horn, they squealed the brakes, but the boys didn't flinch. By all accounts, when the Saline County deputies showed up a few minutes later, they ignored the train employees' insistence and the insistence of the paramedics that the boys must have already been dead when they were placed on the tracks. By all accounts, the deputies also refused to consider the possibility that the boys had been murdered and treat the situation as an actual crime scene. Arkansas's longtime chief medical examiner under then-Governor Bill Clinton, Dr. Fahmy Malek, ruled that the boys had smoked so much marijuana that they had passed out on the tracks. A subsequent grand jury convened in Saline County rejected that conclusion and declared that the boys had indeed been murdered before their bodies had been placed on the tracks. A number of people involved in the Boys on the Tracks case were either murdered within the next 2 years or were eventually imprisoned on unrelated charges years later. According to the book, The Boys on the Tracks, written by Mara Leverett of Little Rock, several state and federal investigations into the events surrounding the deaths of Kevin Ives and Don Henry, two teenage boys apparently who stumbled onto something they were not supposed to see in the wee hours of Sunday morning, August 23rd, 1987. Several state and federal investigations in the next few years were obviously shut down from on high. This brings us to our guest. 3 Little Rock television stations are reporting on a man who has come forward 30 years later who claims to have been at those tracks in Alexander, Arkansas, in the wee hours of Sunday morning, August 23rd, 1987. He claims to have witnessed the murders of the two teenage boys, Kevin Ives and Don Henry. Last night, KATV's Jason Peterson interviewed Linda Ives, mother of Kevin Ives, one of the two murdered boys, and she believes this new witness.
I mean, there is no good reason to insert yourself into a murder case and, implicate yourself in a double homicide. He has nothing to gain and everything to lose.
KATV's Jason Peterson also spoke with Keith Ronceval, private investigator working for the Ives family.
He's put himself in jeopardy, not only his freedom, but also his life. So that's why I believe him.
Now we go to the News Radio 102.9 KARN Newsmaker line to welcome former professional wrestler Billy Jack Haynes to the Doc Washburn Show. Mr. Haynes, thank you for coming on the program today. How are you?
I'm doing fine, Doc. How are you?
Doing good. Now, let me ask you, KATV had video footage of you wrestling another well-known wrestler at the time, King Kong Bundy, at a WWE match in Detroit 2 days before the murders of Kevin Ives and Don Henry in Alexander, Arkansas. How and why does a well-known professional wrestler wind up in rural Arkansas in the middle of the night to witness such a thing just a couple of days after a big high-profile wrestling match halfway across the country?
That's a great question. I was born and raised really for crime. At the age of 4, I was abused sexually and physically by one of my mothers, who was married to my father's boyfriends. But I kept that a secret, like I have kept my life a secret for 59 years. And the question you ask is a good one. I was wrestling King Kong Bundy in Detroit, Joe Louis Arena. And what happened is I received an envelope to call home, more or less emergency to me.
Yeah.
Because that's where my blind father who raised me was. So I opened it up, the envelope, Doc, and it had a 501 number, and I knew who the number was because I had talked to the person before, and that was Bill Clinton, Governor Bill Clinton of Arkansas.
So obviously the envelope said call home, but the number wasn't for home. The number was an Arkansas number.
Yes, sir.
So now, how would you have known Governor Clinton?
I met Governor Clinton. Well, we haven't got much time, and it's been 30-some years ago, so your memory isn't going to be right on, but it's going to be good enough. In 1982, I started actually in 1977. I started dealing in Oregon cocaine, and I rose up through the ranks there to where I wanted to make the big time through a guy named Willie Nelson. And
now that's Willie Nelson, not the singer Willie Nelson.
No, I should say it. He was a professional boxer named Willie Nelson or
Okay.
Harold Penland, and he's one of 5 people who could have been my father. I'm really not sure still to this day who really is. DNA, I hope down the road can prove that. But what had happened is when Bill Clinton had called me, he said some of the airdrops in Alexander, Arkansas were being stolen, $500,000 and 10, 15, 20 kilos.
Okay, but wait a minute. We're still trying to figure out how you would have known Bill Clinton. You said something about you started dealing cocaine in Oregon in 1977. Where does Bill Clinton come in that in 1987 you would get an envelope with his phone number in it?
Okay, let's go back and then just continue on forward, because I've been hit in the head so many times. I've got CTE and a few other traumatizing brain injuries, but
yes, sir.
My head is clear enough to know about this. I had to live with the guilt for 30-some years, and I can't imagine what Linda Ives went through living hell, and her husband Larry. So this was August 21st, 87. In 82, I had Willie Nelson, or Harold Penland, who was a drug dealer for cocaine out of Portland, Oregon, said he wanted to introduce me to a man named Barry Seal in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. That's where he was flying down once a month and picking it up.
Now, Barry Seal, of course, was the subject of the Tom Cruise movie that came out last year, American Made, and it's pretty well known that he was apparently an American pilot who became a drug runner for the CIA in the 80s in a clandestine operation in the Iran-Contra affair. Just for people, most people listening to the sound of our voices know who Barry Seal is, but just for the people who wouldn't. So anyway, the cocaine dealer in Oregon, you're saying, wanted you to meet Barry Seal in 1982 in Baton Rouge. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to, become big time, back when I was in my late 20s. And so I had met Barry Seal through Harold Penland, Willie Nelson, and we finally agreed. I was trustworthy enough to where I did it. I believe I did 3 runs where I flew down, picked up 10 kilos from Barry Seal, and then would take and drive it back through rental car and take that chance and risk 3-4 times. They became where they trusted me good enough. And the next time I flew down, they wanted me to come down on my own, meet Barry Seal, and Barry Seal had a politician that he wanted me to meet.
And who was the politician?
The politician, well, when I flew in, I met Barry. We sat down at a table, and a man walked in with what looked like 2 bodyguards who walked ahead and set up about 20 feet ahead of us. And the man was Bill Clinton. I didn't know who he was, but it was a governor, or just out of governor, or whatever, of Arkansas.
Okay, so update to 1987, as KTV mentioned last night. You get this note when you are getting ready to go into a wrestling match with King Kong Bundy in Detroit, and take us from there.
Well, there's a lot in between there, Doc, and it's been a long time, but we've done. Mr. Clinton and I had done business in Florida, where I wrestled professionally, and And then also in 1986, he had called me in to meet everybody at the Rose Law Firm, which I met. So many people. It's where I met Sheriff Jim Steed and Kirk Lane, Jay Campbell, Dan Harmon, Richard Garrett, bar owner. I can't think of his name. I think it's Keith McCaskill, I think it was, and some others. And it was, kind of a neat situation at that time for me. I didn't really know anybody until then. And then in '87, that's when I got let's take us up to the envelope that I got while I was in Detroit wrestling King Kong Bundy.
Yeah.
Because I hadn't heard from anybody from Arkansas until that day.
Okay, so you get this envelope, says call home, and obviously the number in the envelope is not home. You're telling us it's a 501 number, and then what happens?
I called a number, and Bill Clinton was on the other end, but before he wanted to make sure who I was, he quizzed me on a few things and where we had first met, and I said in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, with Barry Seal. And he goes, where do we do business at? And I told him in West Palm Beach in 1984, Florida. And he said, okay, it was great. And hi, Billy, how you doing? And that's how it went. I said, hey, hi, Bill, how are you? And, I don't know how you want to do this, back and forth, lead, so forth. We don't know each other well. I did meet you one time when I was in Arkansas a couple months ago. But it's just I haven't done a radio interview for quite a while. So how do you want to take this down, Doc?
Well, I'm just trying to ask you how you get from Detroit, Michigan, to Alexander, Arkansas.
Okay. Bill Clinton asked me if I wanted to do business the same as we did in Florida. In other words, for the same amount. And I said yes. He said, well, I'll have a ticket for you for tomorrow. And out of Detroit to Little Rock. And that would be August 22nd, 1987. And he said, do you remember the sheriff, which I met there at Rose Law Firm? That was Sheriff Jim Steed. And I said, yes, I do remember him. And he said, well, he'll pick you up, and he'll take you to the governor's mansion where I would then meet him and his wife, Hillary. So that's how that occurred.
So then what happens?
So from there, on the way in, he had told me over the phone, I forgot to tell you to bring a baseball cap, and if I had a wrestling mask. And I said, yes, I did. I had a black wrestling mask. He said, bring it in because you want to come in incognito, because at that time people knew who I was from wrestling. And I said, you got it. So when we got to the mansion, the governor's mansion there in Little Rock, Steed, Sheriff Steed got out, I believe, opened up the gate, the front gate, and we drove around the circle to the front. And I went inside and met Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, and Jim Steed remained outside. The only people that I saw was Bill and Hillary.
Wow.
And shook hands with both. And they told me about the drops that were being stolen out of Alexander, and that they wanted me there. And the situation was two Arkansas State police officers that were stealing the drops. I believe he said 2 drops were stolen with $500,000 to $1 million cash and 10, 15, 20 kilos, which is over $1 million. So my job was to tape. He got me a VHS tape recorder and 2 tapes. I put 1 tape in my suit. I had a suit on and jacket, and I put it in there, and I took the VHS camera with me. He said, I want you to stay inside with Jim Steed. I want you to film the drop and see who's stealing these drops. So no problem. He said, there'll be the other guys will show up, the regular crew. I said, do I know who they are? He goes, yeah, you met them at the Rose Law Firm. So at that time, he said, we'll after everything is done, we'll come back to we'll put the guys in the van. If we do catch them, we'll put them in the van, drive them back, cuff them up, and it'd be my job at that time to beat both of them to death at a said location away from the governor's mansion.
Good grief. Wow. All right, let me ask them before we go further as to what you're saying happened there along the tracks in Alexander, Arkansas. A lot of people are asking, this has been over 30 years ago, and as KTV's Jason Peterson said last night, there was a book written, there have been videos, there have been articles written, but your name has never been mentioned, and a lot of people are wondering why 30 years later you have decided to come forward with this.
Yeah, it's a question I probably should have addressed earlier. I wanted to get out of professional wrestling. I had around with drugs and so forth, with the cocaine, and wrestling was paid real good, between $200,000 and $400,000 a year. I wanted to get out, open a gym. Hulk Hogan was going to be there, and I was going to get clean because I was on painkillers.
Okay.
And I had several torn, I had a torn ACL and rib injuries, back injuries, injuries everywhere in pro wrestling. It's a tough business. We're a stuntman. You take tremendous risk every day.
Right.
And so I wanted to retire and then get clean.
Right.
I don't know why I took this job. I didn't need the money. I guess it was ego. I had a chip on my shoulder. I wasn't myself. I was drugged out. I can't make any excuses.
Yeah.
But now that I'm clean, the reason why this happened, I tried to commit suicide in 2012. I took 40 Xanax, and it seems like a minute afterwards there was a newspaper, and it flew into my leg, and I looked at it, and it was a guy from Oregon named Corporal Keaton Coffey, who had died on the day my mother died. I started looking at every date matched up with me, so I self-induced vomit, and for 4 days it was touch and go. A friend took me in, and I don't know how I survived that. Then in 2014 or 2012 in Benghazi, of all places in Benghazi, the 4 men that were killed, the one, Tyrone Woods, worked at my gym. I mean, it's a miracle, kind of like.
Wait a minute. Tyrone Woods, one of the 4 guys killed at Benghazi, actually worked at your gym in Oregon?
Yes, he went to Oregon City High School. He was a wrestler, and he wanted to, at one time, wanted to become a pro wrestler. Then he wanted to be a Navy SEAL. He ended up being a Navy SEAL, and was in Benghazi. Was called there with another guy, and he died on the roof. And so when he died, I said to myself, "This is it. I'm going to get clean." And I fought it back and forth for a couple of years till 2014, and I said, "The hell with it, man!" I took a lawsuit out against the WWE for CTE and concussions, and I got clean at that time. And that's when 2016 came along. And I got the guilty feeling with Linda Ives,
okay,
because I knew exactly what happened, and I called her up.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, you're saying that your decision to come forward with this almost 30 years later was you had some pangs of conscience after you had gotten off drugs and tried to clean your life up, and you reached out to Linda Ives, the mother of one of the murdered boys, Kevin Ives.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
And now all that's left is to tell you what went down.
Yeah, take us back. Yeah, I interrupted for that because this is a question a lot of people have been asking on social media. Why now? Why after 30 years? And I kind of interrupted what you were talking about going on. So let's go right back to what you were telling us.
Yeah, no, this would be to the best of my ability. I just, the guilt that a man has. My entire life has been an explosion of violence. A lot of people think that I'm insane or crazy, but my father, who raised me, was blind and with diabetes and was wheelchair bound with an amputation. So I was very defensive my entire life. So I did become violent. I did do some crazy things, and I would have fulfilled exactly what Mr. Clinton wanted done that night, but that's not how it came about. At first, at the drop site, I rode with Jim Steed, Sheriff Steed, and we drove and backed in behind the trees. There was an open area where the drop was. Second in was a van that was about 75 feet to the left of us. I think there was flashlight communication because it was very dark. A third car pulled in to the right, and in that car, at the time I didn't know, but in that car was police officers, Kirk Lane and Jay Campbell, and then in the car that pulled in later, there was, let's see, what was his name? Dan Harmon. And at that time, later found out Richard Garrett and Keith McCaskill were also in that car. So I had the tape with me, and I took it out, and we waited, and around midnight, 12:30, the plane came in.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I just ask you? You said I had the tape with me. What does that mean?
Okay. Remember I told you earlier that I was given a VHS tape.
No, sir. I don't know. Tell me all about it.
Okay, at the beginning, because we were kind of going back and forth. Mr. Clinton gave me a VHS tape. Recorder tape that goes over the shoulder, and I was to tape the drop site to see if anybody was going to drive in and steal the drop site. The parachute to come out with the cocaine and the money.
Oh.
And
okay.
So that's what I'm talking about. And so I did tape that. I seen the plane came in. It was around between 12 and 1 a.m. And I did tape that, and nothing happened. The van went out, and they picked up the drop site. They slowly backed out. I believe hit their lights a couple times, and they drove away. And I didn't see there was no two Arkansas State troopers that stole anything. So obviously it was probably an inside job. These guys were stealing it themselves and blaming it on two other people. So
okay, before I got to jump in here because we're getting ready to go to the bottom of the hour news, and if you can hang on with us, we'll bring you on after that.
As long as you need me, Doc,
okay.
I'm here.
All right, we're speaking with Billy Jack Haynes, former professional wrestler with WWE for quite some time, and we will return with him after the bottom of the hour news. He was the subject of Jason Peterson KATV's reports the last couple of nights, and we're kind of following up on that, I guess. More coming up straight ahead as the Doc Washburn Show continues on your news, traffic, and weather station, News Radio 102.9 KARN.
Car animal enthusiast taking calls. Call Doc now. 501-433-0092. Now, the man with the elephant on his pants matches the elephant on his shirt. Doc Washburn, News Radio 102.9 KARN.
All right, Billy Jack Haynes was a professional wrestler for a number of years and was very well known. You can go on YouTube and see him fighting King Kong Bundy or Randy Savage or doing an appearance with Hulk Hogan. Very well known wrestler back in the day. And 30 years later, 30 years after the Boys on the Tracks murders, he has seemed to have inserted himself into, I guess, the biggest murder mystery in the history of modern Arkansas, even though his name never came up. A number of names have come up in Mara Leverett's Boys on the Tracks book and in different articles and movies, videos over the years. But his name never came up. And Jason Peterson did a great job on KTV Wednesday night and last night, and now we're kind of following up on that. And Mr. Haynes is on the News Radio 102.9 KRN Newsmaker line. We had to break for news at the bottom of the hour, but we had asked him how he got from a WWE wrestling match with King Kong Bundy in Detroit all the way to really rural at the time, very rural Saline County, Arkansas. And so let's pick up your story where you left off, sir, and we appreciate your patience.
Thank you, Doc. Okay, my entire life has been a secret. I have kept everything a secret. Both of my wives, neither one knew what I did. The money I saved from selling cocaine went to silver dollars. I never put money in the bank, and I had 2 5-gallon drums full of silver dollars and another half full of Carson City silver dollars. So I had about $6 million in silver dollars. It's nothing to brag about. It's just that my whole life was a secret. That's probably why you haven't heard of me. And when you come clean off drugs, and people who are drug addicts, opiate right now are the biggest problem in the United States. And opiate pills, when you come off them, the first thing I used to think of is, where can I get them? I was taking 30, 40 a day to try and forget this entire mess. And when my dad died, all that, it was horrific. And finally, after I quit, and I seen Tyrone Woods die and all this, it just got to me consciously, and I accepted the Lord at that time, and I took God into my heart, and it's what made me feel that I need to come forward to Linda Ives. I need to tell her exactly what happened to her son. I was there right on site, and I'm the only one living, I think, that knows what's going on site. That's not dead. And I was told if I come forward today that I'm going to be killed. But hey, so everybody dies. Few men live. You got to die sometime. But I'm not going to take this to the grave with me, man. These guys they can go to hell. I'm done with it. You're going to get nothing but truth out of me. And that's where we're at here, Doc.
Okay, now, before we broke for news at the bottom of the hour, you had gotten to the scene of the tracks, but I guess your story had not gotten to the part where the 2 teenage boys showed up yet.
No, sir. Here's what happened there. After the drop, I got to try and stay focused now. I've got just a horrific headache right now, and I get them pretty much daily with this CTE that is brutal in football, wrestling, and hockey, and so forth. So I'm not looking for the pity. I just want to let you know I got to go slow. And what had happened is after the drop, and it was a clean drop, and after the pickup, and after they left, Kirk Lane and Jay Campbell got out of their car, and Sheriff Steed and I got out of his car. Kirk Lane and I shook hands. I shook hands with Jay Campbell, and they didn't know who I was because I was under the mask, and we had only met at the Rose Law Firm, so they didn't really know what was going on and with the camera and so forth. And when they asked who I was, Jim Steed says, I'm with Bill Clinton, and that's really all you need to know. And then when Mr. Sheriff Steed said that, that more or less controlled both of them. At that time, we talked for a while, and eventually they went back to their car, and Dan Harmon got out of the car. I didn't know it was Dan Harmon at the time until he approached, and Dan Harmon seemed very angry, upset. And he goes, "What are you taping? Who are you?" And Sheriff Steed said, "This is Bill Clinton's guy for security." He goes, "Oh, we don't need no security here." He got kind of mouthy and kind of arrogant, and he was extremely high on cocaine. I've never done cocaine, but I sold it, and I've seen a lot of guys high on it. I'm one of the first guys that sold Andy Gibb, to my knowledge, cocaine. I feel bad about that because he got highly addicted on it and ended up dying over it.
Oh, my.
And well, I'm not proud of that, but it's just part of the business. And so Dan Harmon had one of those old white cell phones with him. And he tried to dial Bill Clinton. And he couldn't get through because of the trees and so forth. So he said, come with me, man. And basically, like, he wanted to take charge. And so we wanted to go up to the railroad tracks. There was railroad tracks. We had the flashlights on, and we all basically took off to the tracks, following each other. And he got to the top of the tracks and about ready to make the call when he said, hey, there's guys on the tracks. And what it was there was two men who now we know were the teenage boys, and there was a third on a motorcycle, and a gunshot went off, and they took off. He yelled down, Dan Harmon yelled down to Sheriff Steed to get the MFers. And at that time is when Kirk Lane and Jake Campbell got in their vehicle and tore out after them. They ran to their vehicle and tore out after them. They didn't come back for about 20 minutes.
Okay, hold that thought.
Okay.
We are speaking with a former professional wrestler, Billy Jack Haynes, who was not in any of the books, articles, or videos about the Boys in the Tracks situation, August 23rd, 1987, Saline County, in which a Union Pacific train passing through Saline County, Arkansas, ran over the bodies of two teenage boys. Grand jury decided that the boys had been murdered before they'd been put on the tracks. And our story with Billy Jack Haynes, who was the subject of KTV Jason Peterson's coverage last night and the night before, will continue on the Doc Washburn Show on your news, traffic, and weather station. News Radio 102.9 KARN.
Please call Doc 501-433-0092. Here is Doc Washburn, News Radio 102.9 KARN.
Billy Jack Haynes was a very well-known professional wrestler, the WWE, Vince McMahon's organization. He had a match August 21st, 1987 in Detroit with King Kong Bundy. And we are hearing on the News Radio 102.9 KRN Newsmaker line his account of what happened with the Boys on the Tracks murders. And he's also decided to give us his assertion of who was there. When we had to run to a break, Billy, you had gotten to the point of telling us what all was going on with the boys when they showed up. So take it from there.
Oh, thank you, Doc. Let's see. At that point, they was Kirk Lane and Jay Campbell had took off after the guys that left the track, one in a motorcycle and two that were running, and at that time caught them at a convenience store. I didn't actually see what went down there, so I didn't witness that.
So you're talking about 3 people, though, right?
Yes.
Okay, so any idea who was on a motorcycle?
I had no idea.
Okay, all right.
But now we had found out now that it was a kid named Keith Coney who was later murdered, I think that year.
Oh, my. Okay, all right. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go right ahead.
Oh, no problem. You're not interrupting me at all. You actually helped me a lot, Doc. And when I met you there, I just want to tell you, it was a great honor meeting you there. We did meet in church, kind of by accident. I really enjoyed that in Arkansas. But so let me let's continue. Let me go right over here. Okay, so about 20 minutes later, they came back, and it was kind of torrid because it was really hot that night, kind of humid. And over the shoulder of both Jay Campbell and Kirk Lane, they had the boys. Kirk Lane had one boy, and Jay Campbell had the other. And Kevin Ives is the one that Kirk Lane had over the shoulder, and they were both handcuffed behind their back. And with the flashlights were on them, and they were both bleeding profusely. And you could see from the flashlights that they both had that it looked like they were beaten with the flashlights. It was obvious to me that my stance right at the railroad tracks with the flashlights on, the one boy was already dead. I can't think of his name, not Kevin Ives, but Don Henry. Don Henry was dead. And they just threw them both down over like a sack of potatoes, and still breathing, but bleeding profusely and actually vomiting blood was Kevin Ives.
Oh, my.
And at that point, Dan Harmon had held up the phone to me and said that Clinton wanted to talk to me.
Oh, my.
Governor Clinton. I went up there, grabbed the phone, and told Bill Clinton, I said, man, it's not 2 Arkansas State troopers that took any drop. There was no drop taken at all. And now there's these 2 kids. And it looks like they're dead. And he goes, well, we can't leave no witnesses, Billy. We got to get rid of them. Can't leave no witnesses. And I heard Hillary in the background say the same thing. Cannot leave any witnesses.
Oh, my.
And I guess I said it loud enough to where at that time I looked down, and at full force, the butt of the rifle, which I guess was the kid's rifle, Kevin Ives' rifle, he took the butt and smashed him in the back of the head and killed him instantly.
Oh, my.
That was it. And that was Kirk Lane that done that to him. So now they're dead. Jay Campbell, for some reason, takes out a knife and plows in the back of the other kid, stabs him in the back, left the knife in, because I just want to make sure he's dead.
Oh, my.
So everybody's standing around, and now all of a sudden these other 2 guys come up, which is Richard Garrett, who I had met, and the guy who owned the Keith McCaskill, the guy that owned the nightclub that was selling dope there, cocaine. So it was just an absolute mess. They both had blood all over them. I had told Bill Clinton at that time that I guess they're dead. Or I don't even know what I said at that time, but now the kids were dead. So I'm up on the tracks. Next thing I know is that by the hair and by the seat of the crotch of their pants, They were both thrown up onto the tracks. They weren't very big kids at all. And Kirk Lane and Jay Campbell threw them on the tracks. And it was Bill Clinton himself was the one who told me to place them between the tracks and lay them together.
Oh,
so at
goodness.
that time, I mean, I didn't want to do that, but if I don't do that at that time, I'm going to get shot and killed. That's what I'm thinking in my mind. I didn't come there to kill no kids, so I want everybody to know that right now. But this went down. I would have fulfilled my contract with Mr. Clinton, with the 2 state troopers. That's what I came down there to do, and I would have done that. I'm not afraid to admit that. But I didn't come down there for 2 young kids to get killed, Doc. And so that's what ended up happening. So they left. Kirk Lane and Jay Campbell left first, I guess, to get cleaned up or whatever. And so now I look up. I think I talked to Bill Clinton twice. I think he phoned back again. I'm kind of confused right now. But at that time, they had the camera, the VHS recorder out taping me, and said, "Now we've got you on tape." And they laughed about it. And that was Sheriff Jim Steed and McCaskill were laughing. Well, Richard Garrett, Dan Harmon, and I were on the tracks, and here's the boys. We put them between the tracks, and then I did talk to Clinton the second time, and he said to put them between the tracks because it would look like an accident. And that's what happened. Put them between the tracks, and I didn't know what I was supposed to do. If I'm guilty of anything at that time, that's what I'm guilty of.
Okay.
And
you know what? We've got a couple more questions. I've got a couple more questions I would like to ask of you, and we have to go into the top of the hour news. We certainly hadn't planned on talking to you this long. Can you stick around for one more segment, possibly?
I can do as long as you want. Look, it's been 31 years that these people went through hell.
Wow.
So for the Ives family.
Okay.
That's
All
what
right.
I'm here
All right.
for.
Thank you very much. We're talking to Billy Jack Haynes. Goodness, what a story. Goodness gracious, what a story. Billy Jack Haynes, former professional wrestler, and who was the subject of Jason Peterson's KATV report Wednesday night and Thursday night. And now, out of the blue, naming names on the Doc Washburn Show. A couple more questions coming up straight ahead. It's 3 o'clock.
If Rush Limbaugh and Mark Levin were slices of rye bread, Doc Washburn would be the liverwurst. Here's Doc on News Radio 102.9 KARN.
Never had a day like this in my 40-year radio career. On the News Radio 102.9 KARN Newsmaker line is Billy Jack Haynes. He has made some startling allegations about the Boys on the Tracks murders, August 23rd, 1987, in Saline County, Arkansas. Mr. Haynes, we appreciate your patience. I guess at this point, the question that any interviewer would ask is, well, first of all, do you have any way of proving your allegations?
Well, let me finish this talk. Let me close this thing out. It's only a couple minutes more.
Okay.
We were at the point where Kirk Lane and Jay Campbell had already left after basically killing the 2 boys, and went back to get cleaned up wherever they were headed. They left. It was approximately probably 3:30, something like that, 3. And there was a Richard Garrett that was on the tracks that helped myself and Dan Harmon put the boys between the tracks and that was basically it. And then Steed and McCaskill were down below with the VHS recorder taping me. So after all was said and done, talked to Clinton, and it was basically Clinton's idea to put him between the tracks, and then to finish off the one kid that was still alive, which was probably going to die anyway. And that's what happened. They all left. Now, the important thing to remember here is I really do have nothing to gain out of this except to be killed like everybody else has been killed. If they want to do that, well, you'll know where to look. But like I said, they can all, go to the devil because I found the Lord, and to me, that's a much stronger, case for me. Linda Ives and Larry Ives, I needed to come clean with that. With Tyrone Woods, who died 2012 in Benghazi. I never said politically that I was. At one time, I was a left-wing radical with Saul Alinsky, Bill Ayers, Bernadine Dorn, the Weather Underground. I was there at one time. So I'm not into politics anymore. I really am not. It means nothing to me. But
okay, I hear all that, but the question is, at this point, and any interviewer is going to ask it, whether it's me or Larry King or Tom Snyder, any interviewer is going to ask you, do you have any way of proving this?
Well, here's what happened at the very end. Now, they thought there was only one tape. Jim Steed did. So I still had the VHS recorder. And Sheriff Steed wanted to leave. And I said, that Mr. Clinton, I said, Governor Clinton wanted me to get a picture, which I don't believe he said to do this, but he wanted me to get taped highlights of them being run over by the track. So he went back to his car and figuring that I didn't have anything. It was just a joke, I guess, but I taped it. I taped 8 seconds of it, of the boys being run over.
Okay, wait, so you got the videotape?
Well, that's something that my private investigator and I haven't decided to say where, why, or anything.
Okay.
That's up to him. That's up to the private investigator.
Okay.
And but that would be a big piece of the puzzle if that was true. The whole thing is these days, you want to look for the killer, you don't have to look far. Just look inside Saline County, right there. That's where you got to look. And they're pointing fingers elsewhere. I just told you where it went, and only a fool would say that if it didn't happen.
In other words, if I understand you correctly, when I asked the question, can you prove what happened? If I understand what you're saying correctly is, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, so forgive me, but if I understand correctly, what you're saying is, would I be coming out saying all this, risking my life, et cetera, for no gain whatsoever, if this didn't happen? Is that kind of the case you're making?
No, Doc, it isn't. The case I'm making is after 27 years of drug addiction. Anybody who's been a drug addict, when you become clean, you become pure. And then when you get God and the purity that's mixed in with it, if you got any kind of heart or conscience at all, you come forward with any guilt that you have. There's so much I haven't talked in between, the elite, the enforcer, executioner, all that stuff. I haven't even began to touch with you. There's all kinds of in-between stuff.
Okay. Well, I guess, okay. Let me ask you this, because social media is going to be going nuts on this. I'm sure we'll be getting calls, and there are going to be people who believe every word that you say, and there are also going to be people who are very questionable. So I guess to wrap up the interview, for those who do not believe you, what is your best case for answering the question of why they should?
Well, I can't speak for anybody. Everybody has to speak for themselves. I think it's just common sense. Just go back to the very beginning with the medical examiner lying about everything. Bill Clinton blocking everything. Dan Harmon going over to. I was told Linda Ives said that Dan Harmon went over and tried to console her and be her district attorney or whatever. You know, all he was doing was covering up time. They all lied about everything. I read everything now. After 27 years, I got on the internet and I've read the entire everything that's on there, and it's all full of lies and scams. And that's why I came forward, to tell the truth, that I was on the tracks. And I did participate in putting the boys on the tracks. And not that I wanted to, but I probably would have been shot if I didn't. That's it.
Okay.
They believe what they want to believe. I mean, only a fool would come forward and say what I'm saying now, because they're going to come out after me, try and kill me. I don't care. You know, it's in God's hands. That's the way I look at it. I love the Lord. I've found I love instead of hate, like I've been my whole life. Not hate, but just why always, you know, my dad and mother, abuse and stuff like that. Just everybody's went through things like this. But this year, with Tyrone Woods getting clean and then coming to help Linda and Larry Ives, has been a beautiful thing for me. And then a great man, if I can get this in real quick, is Keith Ronzavall, a private investigator that flew out here to Portland to get me. We came back together to Little Rock and then put this thing together with the Ives family. And I feel like I'm totally pure inside. I can live again. Yeah, and she felt good. And the secret's over now. This is the truth. This is what happened. Believe it or not.
All right, Billy Jack Haynes, a former professional wrestler, a remarkable interview, and we appreciate you coming on the Doc Washburn Show today.
Doc, thank you. Thank you, Little Rock.
Thank you very much. Wow. I've never had an interview like that in my life. And I don't know what to say. Perhaps you have some thoughts. 501-433-0092. The Doc Washburn Show continues on your news, traffic, and weather station, News Radio 102.9 KARN.
This is Doc Washburn, News Radio 102.9 KARN.
All right. Our next caller is Linda Ives, mother of Kevin Ives, one of the murdered boys in the tracks, August 23rd, 1987. Linda, that had to be very difficult interview to listen to. What do you think?
Well, of course, I've been listening to it and processing it and examining it for over a year. And, I didn't just meet Billy yesterday. It's been probably a little over a year or very close to that. And so I've had a lot of time to think about it and to try to see how it relates to other witnesses' statements and that kind of thing. So, you just you do what you got to do. That's all you can do. Just trying to see how it fits in with things that I know for a fact. And I can tell you that things that Billy Jack says fit in seamlessly with other witness accounts who are totally unknown to him, other than things that happened that night, and even people, that had nothing to do with the scene there that night. And he knows things that not everybody would know. And so it's there's still been some pieces for me that have been missing for years. We've always had a lot of the pieces. Anybody who knows me knows I've talked about Kirk Lane, Jay Campbell, Dan Harmon, a lot of other people over the years, and it doesn't it doesn't distract from anything they say and anything we know about them.
So you find Billy to be a credible witness?
I absolutely do. I believe everything that Billy says, and one of the main reasons that I do is that, like he said, he has absolutely nothing to gain from this and everything to lose. He actually didn't even contact me directly in the beginning, but he had seen an article about the lawsuit that was in the paper out there. And
the Freedom of Information Act lawsuit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry, the FOI lawsuit we filed.
Yeah.
And so he contacted the judge in that case, which of course couldn't even discuss it with him.
Right.
But then was put in contact with us, and so we've been talking to him ever since, and looking for things that we didn't think were true or didn't ring true. And I just have to say that I believe everything he says. I've always known that Clinton was involved, at least to the extent that he knew what was going on in MENA, and he allowed it to go on, and he made money from going on. I think that the MENA drug smuggling and weapons smuggling operation was their first pay-to-play scheme here in Arkansas. And, he was certain, I knew he was making money from it. And I've never indicated that I thought he and Hillary down on the tarmac unloading drugs. But I really was shocked that they gave the order to kill. And I believe they did. Do I have any proof of that? I have Billy's statement to that effect. And that's all. We're still working to try to corroborate some of the things that we know now. We want to prove or disprove, things that are said. So, it's been a roller coaster ride, is all I can say. I think it's kind of confusing, especially for people who are on the Justice page, which is the Facebook page for Kevin and Don. It's called Justice for Kevin Ives and Don Henry.
Yes, ma'am.
And, for a long time we talked about Dan Harmon, and Charlene Wilson and her confession and that. And then the next thing you know, we're on to, I don't know who else was next, maybe Kirk Lane and Jay Campbell. And, they're trying to figure out how they fit together. And, various different scenarios and things that have gone on for the last 30 years. And, but Billy's statement meshes them together seamlessly. And so I don't know what else to say other than I believe in what he says. I have no reason not to at this point, for sure.
All right. And I'm sure you've talked to him a lot longer than we have.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Linda Ives, thank you so much. And as always, our thoughts and prayers are with you and your family and the family of Don Henry. And we appreciate you coming on the program.
Thank you so much.
Conspiracy theorist Jesse the Body Ventura has warned the Masons not to initiate Doc Washburn. Call Doc now, 501-433-0092. Here is Doc Washburn, News Radio 102.9, KARN.
I've never had a day like this in my entire 40-year radio career. Former professional wrestler Billy Jack Haynes was the subject of reports on Fox 16 and KRK4 on Tuesday night, on KATV Wednesday night, and last night with Jason Peterson. And he is claiming to have witnessed the murders of the boys on the tracks, Kevin Ives and Don Henry, August 23rd, 1987, in Saline County. What has never been heard before anywhere is he named names of people that he claims were there. What a day this has been. 501-433-0092. Of course, lines are jammed every time I change callers. One will open up for you to try to get through. Let's go to the News Radio 102.9 KRN Newsmaker line for Linda Ives' attorney, Robert David Lewis. R. David Lewis, I first met when I'd only been here for a few months in 2014, and he had come on the program to talk about a different legal case that was in the news, and he mentioned before we went on the air, he was doing a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit on behalf of Linda Ives, and we wound up talking about that. And 2014 was the first time I ever talked about Boys on the Tracks on the radio, and it's come up from time to time whenever there's a new development in the news. Sir, were you listening in to the interview with Billy Jack Haynes?
Yes, I was. That was great, Doc.
What do you think?
Well, I've got an office full of transcripts and books and depositions over here, and he didn't say anything inconsistent with anything that I've got in my office, except with the possible exception, Charlene Wilson gave a long written statement too about what was there and who was there, and she names the same people, and I think it's kind of odd that she would not mention Billy Jack Haynes if he were there, because he's 6'4" and 280 pounds, and he was a monster of a guy back in those days. And it's kind of funny that she would not mention him, but everything he said is consistent with the all of the evidence. And so either he was there or he's done a lot of studying and has a great memory, because he mentions things and puts things together that never made sense before, like the story about the police officers beating up the kids at the store. And I never could figure how that fit into this. But now,
which was about a mile away.
I'm sorry.
Which was about a mile away.
Yeah, and now it makes sense. Now it all fits together.
I never understood that part of it either. I never understood that part of it either. One of the things that Jason Peterson on KTV pointed out is that with the big book, Boys on the Tracks by Merrill Everett, that came out in the late 90s, and with all the articles, all the videos that have been done, there usually are the same names that come up over and over again, but Billy Jack Haynes was not one of them.
I know. And there's all other people that write books about this. Terry Reid writes a book. Billy Jack is not in any of this.
Yeah.
And that bothers me, but his story is consistent with the facts we know. Of course, he could learn all this. He could read the same books we read and learn all that.
But the question is, what would his incentive be? What would his motive be for putting himself in the middle as a witness to a murder case if he didn't have something to do with it? That's the thing that Jason Peterson at KTV and Tyler Thomason over at KRK and people like you and me are all scratching our heads.
Yeah, I know. Let me tell you what I think. I don't know, of course, at all, but there are a couple of things that fit into this. That he is the lead plaintiff in the Wrestling Federation lawsuit about that they got brain damage because of wrestling all these years.
He mentioned CTE, which stands for chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. Yeah, and I'm thinking, is it possible that he has hallucinated himself into this story?
I don't know. Does CTE have anything to do with hallucinations?
I don't know. But, except for the fact that nobody else has talked about him being there, it's very consistent with all the evidence.
Yeah. Linda Ives says she believes him. The private investigator helping out Linda Ives, Keith Ronzavales, says he believes him.
Yeah, I know.
But my job is just to try to be a conduit for basically exposing things that are in the news.
Exactly.
And when we saw that this man was on 3 different television stations in 3 days, it kind of got our attention.
I agree.
And
plus, I'm not saying I disbelieve him. I'm just saying there are some questions I'd like to ask him.
Yeah, I'm not saying I believe or disbelieve, but it was obviously, I think it could arguably be said that this is the biggest murder mystery in in modern Arkansas. And people have been trying to figure out for 30 years what happened. And according to Mayor Leverett's book, there were several state and federal investigations in the early years that seemed to have been shut down from on high.
Yes.
And so people in central Arkansas and other parts of the country have always wanted to know.
Well, let me tell you a couple of explanations of that.
Yeah.
You know, first of all, Fahmy Malak spun this tale that is totally unbelievable. And Fahmy Malak and Bill Clinton went back a long way, because Fahmy Malak testified for Bill Clinton's mother in a malpractice case before this ever started. And the state police investigation got stopped at the very top. The grand juries that Asa Hutchinson was running in Fort Smith never issued subpoenas. All the grand juries got stopped. And who's got the power to stop that except the governor that became the president?
Fahmy Malak, for people, if you're wondering, if you're who are David Lewis is talking about, he was the chief medical examiner of the state of Arkansas for many years under Bill Clinton, until about the time he was running for president. And the allegation about Fahmy Malak covering for Bill Clinton's mother, a nurse anesthetist in Hot Springs, is covered in some detail in Mara Leverett's book, Boys on the Tracks.
No question about it.
And even the grand jury that Dan Harmon impaneled in Saline County basically overturned Fahmy Malak's conclusion that the boys passed out from smoking too much marijuana on the railroad tracks and said that there was a homicide. So
I was sort of involved in that grand jury in that I was in touch with Garrett and Harmon at the time and represented at least one witness. So I was real close to it, and I fully believed that Harmon and Garrett were doing the right thing. They convinced me.
With the grand jury.
Yeah,
that's what we're talking about. Yeah, and apparently you changed your opinion later on.
Yeah.
All right, R. David Lewis, it's been quite a day, and we appreciate you chiming in. Thank you so much.
Hey, listen, this needs to be a transcript on the front page of the Washington Post or New York Times or something. That was a great interview, Doc.
Well, I appreciate your kind words. Thank you very much.